All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we're going to continue on about the presidency. We're going to specifically look at the requirements and the little perks and the privileges that the president gets. Okay, so let's look at the objectives. We're going to analyze the president having the power to veto. Uh, excuse me. We're going to examine the significance of giving the president the power to negotiate treaties. Like, why is that so important? you know, and we're going to create an argument on the extent of executive privileges of the president. And if you don't know what executive privileges are, we're going to talk about them. Okay, so don't worry about that. Now, here is your warm up question or picture say. Now, the question is basically two parts. The first one is simply this: what is the president? What is he wanting? It's pretty obvious. It says it right there. But the second part is how much? How much is the president wanting? Is it a little bit? Is it like, would you say medium size? Would you say a lot? And how do you know it's that size? So if you say, oh, it's very little, well, why do you say that? You know, if you say, oh, it's humongous amount, well, how do you know it's humongous? What in the picture shows you that that's a lot more than that's humongous. Okay, so analyze the picture, really think about it, justify it. Okay, um, and be sure to pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so Article 2 of the Constitution specifies that a president is elected to a term of 4 years. Now, the thing is, I've had some students in class say, well, isn't it all 4 years? No, because in Congress, House of Representative members are 2 years and senators are 6 years. So not everybody in government has the same amount of years. The president is 4 years. Okay. Now, here are the requirements to be president. Number one, you have to be a natural born citizen, meaning you have to be born on American soil. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Okay, well, one is the United States territory, of course. Any territory that's owned by the United States, like Puerto Rico, but also any like land outside of our country, such as like military bases, embassies. That soil on those lands is just as American as it is in Kansas or here in California. Okay, so as long as a person is born on that land, they are American citizens. Okay, now, like I said in class, a lot of students didn't know this, but Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor in California. And a lot of people were like, he should run for president. Well, he couldn't because he was born in Austria. He is a citizen now, but he's not a natural born citizen. Okay, and that's what they're talking about. The other thing is you have to be at least 35 years old. Okay. Now, a student some years ago asked me, what if your birthday was on the election day? Could you still run? Technically, yes. Because on that day, if you were elected, you would be 35 years old. Ergo, you could be president. But if your birthday was the day after the election, you could not be president because if you were picked, you would be only 34 years old. So you have to be at least 35. The other thing is you have to live in the United States for at least 14 years consecutively. Okay. So let's say you were wanting to run for president. Say you're 17. You graduate high school. You decide you don't want to live in Europe for a year or Mexico or Japan, whatever. You have to, if you plan on being president at 35 years old, you have to be back here in the United States living as a resident right before you turn 21 years old. Because then you'd be for here for 14 consecutive years and then you could become president. You can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna be here for 6 years, take another year off, move somewhere else, and then come back. No, you have to live here consecutively 14 years. Now, if you've noticed, there's nothing in the requirements that says about education. You don't see anything about saying, oh, you have to go to school, you have to go to college, you have to have a law degree. You don't see that because it's not a requirement, believe it or not, to become president. Another thing you don't see, which a student asked me last year was, well, what if you have a record? Could you be president? Yes, technically, yes. The only thing you can't be president for if you have a record is if you are charged and you've served with treason. Treason's the only crime that's not forgiven in the United States. If you are charged with treason and you're found guilty, you cannot even hold a mayor position in a small little town, not even that, because you are seen as a traitor to our country. Ergo, you can't have a government job. Okay. Now, we've only had one president who's ever served more than 2 terms, and that's FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He served 3. He ran for a fourth, he won it, but before he could be inaugurated, he died. Okay. Um, a lot of presidents before him who were liked and people would have elected him to a third term. They limited themselves because that's what George Washington did. So out of respect for Washington, they um, stopped at 2. Franklin D. Roosevelt said he would have stopped, but he wanted to see the end of World War II. He felt he needed to be the commander in chief until World War II ended, but he died before it ended. And it's because of him that the 22nd Amendment was created, which limits the president now to simply 2 terms. So 8 years total. So a lot of people were like, when Obama stepped down, they're like, oh, we want him to run again. He can't. Same thing with Bush Jr. There were some people saying, we want him to run again. He can't. He did his 2 terms. Now, can this amendment be repealed and changed? Yeah. But is that going to take some effort? Absolutely. So, but can it be changed? Absolutely. Yeah, I can. Now, the power of the presidents is very vague. And if you don't know what vague means, it means like not clear. It's clear as mud, you know. And it doesn't specifically say the president can't do this, it can't do that. There's a lot of gray area. And sometimes when they're like, well, does the president have the power to do this? And a lot of times they say, well, it doesn't say he can't do this. So the president can then, because it doesn't specify. Now, there are certain things that are very cut and dry. And one of those things is treaties. The president has the right to negotiate treaties with other countries. Now, if the president wants to make a peace treaty with, let's say, Mexico or Saudi Arabia or whatever, they can do it, but they need 2/3 of the Senate to approve it. Now, typically, um, this goes off without a hitch. It goes no problem. Most of the time, the Senate says, "Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, no problem." But there has been 2 treaties in our history where the Senate said no, and that is the Treaty of Versailles and the SALT Treaty. The Treaty of Versailles was to end World War One, and basically Woodrow Wilson said we need to form a League of Nations. So just in case something happens in Europe, we can support them. And a lot of Americans were like, no, whatever happens in Europe, let them deal with it. That has nothing to do with America. So it'd be like if your neighbors were fighting and arguing and things like that, you're not going to bust through their door and stop their fighting and arguing, right? Chances are you're going to listen, right? You might try to listen, see if hear if a body drops, just in case, but you're not going to bust through the door. And that's what Americans were telling Wilson. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's focus on us, and whatever Europe does, let them do that. The other one was a SALT treaty, so strategic arms limitation treaty, and this was during the Cold War. Basically, the United States and Russia were stockpiling nuclear weapons, and we both agreed, you know what? Let's limit that number of missiles and things like that. So the president made this treaty with Russia, and the Senate said no, because American people were like, no, we can't trust the Russians. You can't trust them to say, oh, yeah, we're going to stop making weapons. They're going to keep making them. So they didn't really trust the Russians all too much. So that's why that treaty didn't work. Now, like I said in the last lesson we had, the president enforces law. That's his job, to make sure that we, the people, are following the law. But the president also has the power to suggest laws as well. Okay. Now, here's the thing: every January, the president is supposed to give this thing called the State of the Union address. And they give it to Congress, basically saying how the country is doing, what their plan is for the future. If they're planning on creating new programs, that they have a direction for the country, like get people more jobs or rebuild the country, whatever it may be. That's the time when the president tells the whole country the plan, and that's through a State of the Union address. Now, the president, again, can't is enforcing laws. They can propose laws, but they could actually also stop laws, and this is called veto. This is where the president has the power to say no to a law. So when Congress says, "Hey, we have this law we have, and we want it passed," um, if it passes the House and the Senate, it goes to the president. The president then can say yes or no. The president has 10 days to say yes or no. If they say don't do anything, say neither, then the law passes. But the president can say no, and that's a veto. Now, when the president vetoes, does that mean that's the end of the law? No, 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 no. See, what happens is then that law goes to back to the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the thing is, if they really want that law to be passed, they have to keep it the same and then get it passed by 2/3 majority, which is very difficult. And if they are able to do that, then the proposed law becomes law, and the president can't veto it again. Okay, so that's the thing. Okay, the president, yeah, can say no, but again, he's not the king. He's not all powerful. Congress can override him, and this is one of the ways. The other thing is a pocket veto. Now, this is usually a little tricky thing that the president has at the end of a session because Congress is like you guys. They have winter break, they have summer break, things like that. Um, and so what happens is, let's say Congress is about to go out in session, but they pass the bill and there's like 6 days left. Now, the president can either like let it go because again, the president has 10 days, and if there's 6 days left, then the bill's just going to die. But sometimes the president is kind of like a little jerk and they'll wait to the last day and then they'll say no. So they'll veto it. So Congress on the last day of when they have to go to work, they can either try to get everyone back to vote on it or just let it die. And a lot of times they just let it die because it's just like you guys in school, the last day. Or do you really want to do work? No. You want to kick back, relax, enjoy. Some of these senators and congressmen and stuff like that, they're already on planes. They're ready to go home. So that's what a pocket veto is. Now, there's a thing called inherent powers, and those are the powers that are kind of inferred into the Constitution. It's suggested, it's not really mentioned. It's just like it should be there. And one of the things is like foreign policy. Okay, so when the president says this is our relationship, what's going on with our relationship with Pakistan and India and Russia and any other country, that's our stance as a country. We don't listen to Congress when say Congress says, "Oh, we stand with this country or this country." Okay, that's great, but our foreign policy is based off the president because remember he's our head of state. He's the guy who's representing us. So we got to follow that. And again, some people might not like it, some will. So, it's the way it is. Another thing is an executive agreement is an agreement between the president and another agency, a government. And this doesn't require the Senate to act. The Senate doesn't have to say, "Oh, you can't agree to that," or you have to put these conditions in. No, and so like when like the president does something like let's say trade hostages for money, you know, like we get a hostage and the president paid some money, that's an agreement. That's an executive agreement between the president and this other country, you know, and the Senate can't do anything. They can argue and be mad all they want, but the president has that right. And the Supreme Court has ruled that these agreements are within the inherent powers. Same thing with the executive orders, which are basically orders, rules, declaration, however you want to say it. But basically, it's like a law that the president enforces, and Congress and states can't fight it. Okay. Now, the thing is, like Obama gave this whole thing about the healthcare, saying requiring it for the people, saying, yeah, you have to have healthcare. Now, there were some states that said, no, 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 he can't force me to buy health insurance and this and that. So they got upset and they tried to sue him. Thing is, the Supreme Court basically said he can do that. That's an executive order, so not much you can do. The other thing is executive privilege. This is when a president decides what information should be released from their branch of the government. Okay. So a great example would be like aliens. All right. So like aliens, all this stuff about aliens. Remember, aliens are in the sky. And we have a branch of military that deals with things in the sky, and that's the Air Force. That's why Air Force is usually the people who are in charge of the department is in charge of anything type of alien and stuff like that. Um, Alien sightings and all that kind of stuff. And because the president is commander in chief, he is in charge of the uh, Air Force. So all that information about aliens that goes to him. And the president then can decide what to release to the people and what to keep secret. Now, I've heard so many times since I was a little kid, the government keeps all these secrets from us and this and that. They don't want you to know this. And it's like, well, yeah, duh. But why? Why do they want to keep this stuff a secret? Well, one thing is they could be using it to protect diplomacy. So our relationship with another country could be hindered if the president spills secrets. Same thing with our military. We have, tanks and boats and planes that do things that, you know, are unique. And that's why we don't tell people, oh, we got this machine that could do this and that, blah, 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 because we're trying to keep it a secret. We don't want them to know because then they might try to steal that technology or replicate it or try to top it. you know the other thing is to keep the people who tell the presidents things, keep their name and some of that secret, because if, let's say, a spy told the president, hey, I heard this is this about this country, and the president is questioned by the press, and he goes, oh yeah, so and so, this person told me this about this and this country, do you think that person is going to trust the president again? No, because he just put them on blast. And think about this, if there's another spy who knows things and wants to share with us, do you think they're going to tell the president that now that he put that person on blast? No. They're going to be like, oh, I'm not going to be dragged through the mud and then I'm going to be looked at, be spotlighted. No. So that's why this rule and stuff is put in. All right. Now comes the line of succession. What happens when the president dies? Well, as obviously it goes to the vice president. And as of today, we don't have a Speaker of the House. So if the vice president can't do it and the Speaker, we don't have a Speaker of the House, then it goes to the president pro tempore of the Senate. And let's say something happens to them, they can't do it. Then it goes to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, then afterwards, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there is a line of succession. And the thing is, though, like a student asked me, well, is this job more important than this one? Is that why it's put up there? No. The answer is very simple. Basically, it's like this. They looked at, when they were creating this list, They said, okay, which job was created first? Secretary of State. Which one was second? Secretary of Treasury. Which one was third? Defense. And they just kept going down. So the person at the very bottom of the list right now is the Secretary of Homeland Security. Doesn't mean that their job is less important than everyone above them. No, it's just that, hey, this is a new position. We're going to put you at the bottom. All right, so here's my question to you. What is your opinion about executive privilege, the executive privilege clause? Do you think a president should be able to use this at any time? Or do you think they should justify why they're not telling us, the secrets? So what I mean by this is, um, like let's say the thing about aliens. Let's say there's video and pictures and some of that, and the press asks the president, "Why aren't you telling us about this? Why aren't you spilling the secret?" Should the president be allowed to say, "I don't have to tell you anything, so I'm not"? Or do you think the president should at least have to say, "Hey, you know what? This is military secrets. I deal with military secrets. I can't tell you guys that, or this would affect people's lives, and things like that. So I can't, to keep everything secret, and calm and safe. I can't disavouch that knowledge." So what do you think? What do you think? Should they just be able to say no? I'm not gonna tell you nothing, or should they have to at least justify why they're not giving us all the information? Okay. So once you finish this lesson or this question, you're done with this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. With that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you later. Okay.